What could turn a simple railway worker's son into one of the greatest military commanders in history? How did a boy from a working-class neighborhood in Odessa become a marshal who liberated half of Europe? Rodion Malinovsky went from being a track inspector to a front commander. His troops took Stalingrad, crossed the Dnieper, stormed Budapest, and liberated Vienna. What lies behind this phenomenal rise? Chance, talent, or something more? Today, we will reveal the secret of the man who changed the course of World War II and went down in history as the liberator of the peoples of Europe. If you are impressed by this incredible story of the rise from a simple worker to a martial liberator, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And in the comments, let's discuss an intriguing question. What do you think was the main secret of Malinovsky's success? Natural talent, life circumstances, or the special charisma of a leader? Share your opinion. What qualities help ordinary people accomplish historic feats? In 1898, a boy was born into a simple railway family in Odessa, who was destined to become one of the greatest liberators of Europe. Rodion Yakovlevich Malinovsky was named after a saint. But his sainthood would be special, the sainthood of liberating peoples from the fascist yoke. His father, Yakov Rodionovich, worked as a simple track inspector on the Odessa-Baltic Railway. Every day he walked along the tracks, checking their condition, unaware that his son would travel the roads of Europe in a completely different way. His mother, Anna Semyonovna, was a housewife who raised 3 children in an atmosphere of hard work and honesty. Rodion spent his childhood in a working-class neighborhood of Odessa, where the clatter of wheels and the whistles of steam locomotives could be heard every day. The boy grew up among ordinary people, absorbing their wisdom and fortitude. His father often took his son to work with him, showing him how important it was to do his job conscientiously. "You see, son," Yakov Rodionovich would say, "if I don't check the rails properly, something bad could happen. People's lives depend on each of us." His father's words were prophetic. Rodion's decisions would later determine the fate of millions. At school, the boy showed remarkable abilities. Teachers noted his sharp mind, his ability to quickly analyze situations and find unconventional solutions. He was particularly good at mathematics and history. Studying the great battles of the past, the young Malinovsky could not have imagined that he himself would go down in history as one of the best commanders of the 20th century. Odessa at that time was a multinational city where Russians, Ukrainians, Jews, Greeks, and Bulgarians lived peacefully together. This atmosphere of tolerance and understanding of different cultures had a profound influence on the formation of the future marshal's character. From childhood, he understood that all peoples deserve freedom and respect. Perhaps this is why his troops would later be welcomed as liberators in every country in Europe. When Rodion turned 16, his family moved to the small town of Voznesensk in the Kherson province, where his father received a promotion. Here, the young man graduated from elementary school and got a job on the local railroad. It seemed that his fate was predetermined. He would follow in his father's footsteps, work honestly for the good of the people, but remain a simple laborer. However, history had a completely different fate in store for Rodion Malinovsky. In 1914, World War I began, turning the lives of millions of people upside down. The 19-year-old young man was drafted into the army. No one could have imagined that this modest son of a railroad worker would become one of the most outstanding military leaders in human history. Seeing his son off to the front, his father gave him simple advice. Serve honestly, protect the weak, and remember, you are a Russian soldier. Anna Semyonovna cried, clutching the icon she had hung around her son's neck to her chest. His mother did not know that her son would carry this icon through all the wars and revolutions, and that it would be with him on the day Vienna was taken. Thus ended the peaceful childhood of the future marshal. Ahead of him lay years of war, revolution, and incredible trials. From a simple Odessa boy raised in a working-class family, Fate would make him a commander whose name would go down in history for liberating Europe from fascism. The First World War found Private Rodion Malinovsky in the ranks of the 4th Rifle Regiment. The young soldier ended up on the most brutal section of the front, in Galicia, where the Russian army was engaged in bloody battles with the Austro-Hungarian troops. Here, near Brusilov and on other battlefields, the future marshal received his baptism of fire. The first battle was a real shock for the 19-year-old boy. The whistling of bullets, the explosions of shells, the cries of the wounded. All this was so far removed from the peaceful life of Odessa. But Malinovsky quickly adapted to the realities of war. His commanders noticed that the young soldier did not lose his head in critical situations, was able to quickly assess the situation and make the right decisions. After only a few months of service, Rodion received his first wound. An Austrian bullet passed through his shoulder, but the soldier refused to go to the hospital and remained in the ranks. "It's just a scratch," he told his company commander. At that time, no one imagined that this scratch would be the first of many wounds that the future liberator of Europe would receive. For his bravery in battle, the young soldier was promoted to non-commissioned officer, then to second lieutenant. Malinovsky proved himself not only a brave fighter, but also a capable commander. He knew how to lead people and find a way out of the most hopeless situations. The soldiers respected him and trusted him like an older brother. Rodion Yakovlevich particularly distinguished himself during the famous Brusilov offensive in 1916. This operation became one of the most successful for the Russian army in World War I. Malinovsky commanded a platoon that was one of the first to break through the Austrian trenches. For this feat, he was awarded the Cross of St. George and the rank of ensign. But the war brought more than just combat experience. Rodion saw with his own eyes the suffering of ordinary people, destroyed cities and villages, and refugees who had lost everything. In his heart, he developed a hatred for war as a phenomenon, and an understanding that military force should only be used to protect the weak and restore justice. These convictions would later become the basis of his military philosophy: to fight not for glory, but for liberation. The February Revolution of 1917 found Ensign Malinovsky on the Romanian front. The army was falling apart, soldiers were deserting, and the front was cracking at the seams. In this situation, the young officer showed remarkable fortitude. He did not abandon his post, continuing to command his unit and maintaining discipline and morale among his soldiers. The October Revolution changed the course of history forever. The old army ceased to exist, and the Civil War began. Malinovsky, like millions of his compatriots, was faced with a choice. After much deliberation, he made a decision that would determine his entire future. He joined the Red Army. What made the son of a railway worker, raised in a patriarchal family, side with the Bolsheviks? Perhaps it was the memory of a difficult childhood, an understanding of the injustice of the old world, where ordinary people were doomed to poverty and powerlessness. Or maybe the young officer simply believed in the ideas of equality and brotherhood of all peoples. Thus ended the first military period in the life of Rodion Malinovsky. The First World War gave him invaluable combat experience, tempered his character, and taught him to command people in extreme conditions. But even more severe trials lay ahead: the Civil War, which would become the next step in the formation of a great commander. Ensign Malinovsky began a new military career in the ranks of the Red Army. The Civil War became a school of the highest military skill for him. Here he learned not only combat tactics, but also strategic thinking and the ability to command large units in constantly changing conditions. Initially, Rodion Yakovlevich served in a cavalry unit on the southern front. It was here, in battles with Denikin's and Wrangel's forces, that he became acquainted with the style of warfare that would later be called deep operations. Quick raids, encirclements, and sieges would later become the hallmark of Malinovsky's command. In 1919, the young commander was noticed by the High Command. He was appointed Assistant Chief of Staff of a cavalry brigade. then head of the division's operations department. Did the former railway worker from Odessa really have a natural talent for command? The events of the following years gave a clear answer to this question. Malinovsky particularly distinguished himself during the defeat of Wrangel's army in Crimea. He developed a plan to break through the Perekop Isthmus, which many considered impregnable. The plan proved so successful that it was used in planning the final operation to liberate the peninsula. After the end of the Civil War, a peaceful respite began. But for the military, it proved to be no less stressful than the fighting. The Red Army had to rebuild itself from a revolutionary militia into a professional force. Malinovsky actively participated in this process, engaging in military education and the development of new tactics. In 1924, Rodion Yakovlevich entered the Frunze Military Academy. It was the right decision. Over the years of war, he had accumulated a wealth of practical experience, but he lacked theoretical knowledge. At the academy, he studied the works of the great commanders of the past, mastered the latest military technologies, and studied the history of military art in depth. His thesis was devoted to the analysis of offensive operations in World War I. The young theorist came to a conclusion that was ahead of its time. Future wars would require close cooperation between all branches of the military, the widespread use of tanks and aircraft, and the creation of powerful strike forces. These conclusions seemed too bold for the 1920s, but in the 1940s, they would become the basis for Malinovsky's victories. After graduating from the academy, the officer had broad prospects. He was appointed to responsible positions in the general staff, then as commander of a regiment and brigade. Each new appointment became a step towards the top of the military hierarchy. Malinovsky proved himself to be a talented organizer, capable of solving the most complex tasks. In the 1930s, he commanded a rifle corps in the Far East. This appointment was no accident. The situation in the region was heating up. The Japanese were preparing for aggression, and experienced commanders capable of organizing a reliable defense of the borders were needed. Malinovsky brilliantly coped with this task, turning his corps into an exemplary unit. But who could have guessed that this period of relative calm would be the last peaceful time in the life of the future Marshal? Ominous clouds were already gathering over Europe. The Nazis came to power in Germany and were openly preparing for a new world war. And it was Rodion Malinovsky who was to become one of the main heroes of the coming battle against fascism. On June 22, 1941, the life of Lieutenant General Rodion Malinovsky, like the fate of millions of Soviet people, changed dramatically. On that day, the most terrible war in human history began. Fascist Germany treacherously attacked the Soviet Union, and the Red Army was faced with the task of not just surviving, but saving the world from the Brown Plague. At the outbreak of the war, Malinovsky commanded the 48th Rifle Corps as part of the 6th Army of the Southern Front. The corps was located in the Tiraspol area of Moldova. It was here, on the southern section of the Soviet-German border, that the general first encountered the military machine of the Third Reich. The first days of the war were a real test for the entire command staff of the Red Army. German troops, who had vast experience in modern warfare, broke through the Soviet defenses, surrounded entire armies, and rapidly advanced deep into Soviet territory. It seemed that nothing could stop the steel avalanche of the Wehrmacht. But General Malinovsky thought otherwise. Unlike many of his colleagues, Rodion Yakovlevich did not lose his composure in the first, most difficult days of the war. His corps retreated in an organized manner, dealing significant blows to the enemy, avoiding encirclement, and maintaining combat capability. Malinovsky understood that the main task at that moment was to prevent the Germans from destroying the Soviet troops one by one. Particularly heavy fighting broke out in the Tiraspol area. German and Romanian troops attempted to force the Dnieper and break through to Odessa. Malinovsky's corps found itself at the center of these battles. For several days, Soviet troops held back the superior forces of the enemy, inflicting heavy losses on them. Malinovsky's leadership qualities were clearly evident in these battles. He personally visited the positions, encouraged the soldiers and officers, found weak spots in the enemy's defenses, and organized counterattacks. His calmness and confidence were transmitted to his subordinates. "The general knows what he's doing," the soldiers said, and this gave them the strength to fight even in the most hopeless situations. By the end of July 1941, the situation on the southern section of the front had become critical. The 11th German Army, commanded by General Manstein, broke through the Soviet defenses and rushed towards the Crimea. The 6th Army, which included Malinovsky's corps, found itself in a difficult position. Under these circumstances, the front command decided on a general retreat across the southern Bug and then across the Dnieper. Malinovsky's corps was to cover the retreat of the main forces. It was an extremely responsible and dangerous task. The slightest mistake could lead to the encirclement and destruction of the entire formation. But General Malinovsky coped with this task brilliantly. His corps not only retreated in an organized manner, avoiding encirclement, but also inflicted serious damage on the enemy. The German command noted in its reports that some Soviet units were retreating with professional skill, without losing control or combat capability. The first months of the war were a harsh lesson for Malinovsky in fighting a powerful enemy. Here he realized that the Germans could only be defeated by surpassing them in military art, in the ability to command troops, in the ability to find the enemy's weak points and strike them with the full power of Soviet weapons. In the fall of 1941, Lieutenant General Malinovsky received a new assignment. He was summoned to Moscow and tasked with forming a new unit, the 66th Army. It was a huge responsibility and, at the same time, recognition of his talent as a commander. The High Command entrusted him with one of the most important tasks, preparing reserves for future offensive operations. The formation of the new army took place under extremely difficult conditions. German troops were approaching Moscow. The situation on the front lines was critical, and there was a shortage of everything: weapons, ammunition, experienced commanders. But Malinovsky demonstrated remarkable organizational skills. In a short time, he managed to create a combat-ready army from recruits and militiamen. Where did this man find the strength to create order out of chaos during the most difficult days of the war? The secret lay in his ability to work with people. Malinovsky remembered his roots and never forgot that he himself came from the people. He understood ordinary soldiers and knew how to find the right words to raise their morale. In December 1941, Malinovsky's army was transferred to the Volkhov front near Leningrad. One of the most dramatic chapters of the Great Patriotic War was unfolding here. The city on the Neva had been under siege for 4 months. Its inhabitants were dying of hunger and cold, but they continued to resist heroically. The task of the 66th Army was to break through the blockade of Leningrad and join forces with the city's defenders. It was an extremely difficult operation. The Germans had created a powerful defense system, using the features of the terrain: swamps, forests, numerous rivers, and lakes. The first attempts to break through the blockade were unsuccessful. The German positions proved to be stronger than expected. Malinovsky's army suffered heavy losses, but continued to attack. Every day of delay meant the death of thousands of Leningraders from starvation. Malinovsky understood that the German positions could not be taken by a simple assault. A new tactic was needed. He organized in-depth reconnaissance, studied the German defense system, and found its weak points. It was here, in the snow-covered forests near Leningrad, that the foundations were laid for the offensive tactics that would later lead to victories in Europe. In the spring of 1942, a new attempt to break the blockade began. This time, Malinovsky took a totally new approach. Instead of frontal attacks, he organized a series of diversionary strikes and threw his main forces into a breakthrough in an unexpected direction. The operation began successfully. Soviet troops broke through the first line of German defenses and advanced several kilometers. It seemed that the blockade was about to be lifted. But the German command managed to pull in reserves and stop the offensive. It would be almost 2 more years before the blockade was completely broken. Despite the incomplete success of the operation, Malinovsky learned a lot in the battles near Leningrad. He understood how important it was to carefully prepare an offensive, how different types of troops needed to interact, and what roles surprise played. He would apply these lessons later when liberating Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, and Austria. In July 1942, Malinovsky's army was transferred to a new direction, near Stalingrad. Here, a battle was unfolding that would determine the outcome of the entire war. The Battle of Stalingrad was a turning point, not only in the Great Patriotic War, but also in the military career of Rodion Malinovsky. It was here, in the ruins of the city on the Volga, that the talent of the future liberator of Europe was finally formed. The 66th Army under his command played a key role in the defeat of the German forces. When Malinovsky's army arrived at Stalingrad in August 1942, the situation was extremely tense. General Paulus's German 6th Army, supported by Gothe's 4th Panzer Army, was pushing towards the Volga. The fighting was already taking place within the city limits, with every house becoming a fortress. Malinovsky was tasked with taking up defensive positions on the northern approaches to Stalingrad and preventing the enemy from breaking through to the Volga. His army took up positions in the area of the tractor factory. Could the son of a former railway worker really stop the renowned German generals? The answer to this question was provided by the following months of bloody fighting. The defense of Stalingrad required Malinovsky to take a completely new approach to warfare. This was not the field warfare that all commanders were accustomed to, but urban combat, fierce, merciless battles for every floor, every room. The usual tactical rules did not apply here. Rodion Yakovlevich quickly understood the specifics of urban combat and reorganized the tactics of his troops. He created assault groups armed with submachine guns, grenades, and flamethrowers. These groups operated autonomously, seeping through the ruins, capturing enemy strongholds, and destroying their manpower. Particularly fierce battles unfolded for the tractor factory. This industrial giant had turned into a veritable fortress. The Germans captured individual workshops several times, but Malinovsky's troops invariably drove them out. The factory changed hands several times, but the Germans never finally captured it. Malinovsky personally participated in the planning of each operation, often visiting the front lines and encouraging the soldiers with his presence. The soldiers saw that their commanders shared all the hardships of war with them, and this gave them additional strength. "Our general will not let us down," the soldiers said, and this belief was more valuable than any orders. In November 1942, Operation Uranus began, a grand offensive by the Red Army, the goal of which was to encircle the German forces near Stalingrad. Malinovsky's army was to deliver a supporting strike, pinning down the enemy and preventing them from transferring forces to repel the main attack. Malinovsky brilliantly accomplished the task. His troops went on the offensive at exactly the appointed time and managed to pin down significant enemy forces. The German command was forced to keep a large group of troops against Malinovsky's army, which made it easier to accomplish the main task of the operation. When the encirclement was complete, Malinovsky's army was given a new task: to participate in the elimination of the encircled group. It was painstaking, exhausting work. Every block, every house had to be taken by force. The Germans resisted fiercely, realizing that their fate was being decided here and now. The victory at Stalingrad was General Malinovsky's moment of glory. For his skillful leadership of the troops in this battle, he was awarded the Order of Suvorov, first class, and received the rank of Colonel General. But most importantly, he gained invaluable experience in commanding a large formation in decisive battles. After the triumphant victory at Stalingrad, Colonel General Malinovsky received a new assignment that would determine his entire future military career. In February 1943, he was appointed commander of the Southern Front, which was soon renamed the 4th Ukrainian Front. Now he faced a daunting task: to liberate Donbass and right bank Ukraine. The situation on the southern section of the Soviet-German front was difficult. Retreating after their defeat at Stalingrad, German troops created a powerful defensive line along the Seversky Donets and Mius rivers. They turned every settlement into a fortress, mined all roads, and blew up bridges and crossings. Would the son of an Odessa railway worker be able to break through this impregnable defense? Malinovsky understood that the German positions could not be taken by a simple assault. Careful preparation, the accumulation of forces and resources, and the choice of the right direction for the main strike were needed. He began by studying the terrain and the enemy's defense system. Reconnaissance groups worked day and night, studying every meter of the enemy's positions. The commander paid particular attention to the interaction of different branches of the armed forces. He understood that modern warfare required precise coordination between infantry, tanks, artillery, and aviation. Under his leadership, a new principle of conducting offensive operations was developed, which would later be called the Malinovsky School. In August 1943, the Donbass offensive operation began. Malinovsky's troops launched their main attack in the direction of Barvinkovo-Izum. This direction was not chosen by chance. The German defenses were weaker here, and a successful breakthrough would threaten the flanks of the entire German group in the Donbass. The offensive developed successfully. Soviet troops broke through the enemy's defenses and rushed forward. Tank Corps, operating in operational depth, disrupted enemy communications, captured important centers of resistance, and prevented the Germans from gaining a foothold on intermediate lines. Malinovsky personally supervised the operation. He often visited the front lines, adjusted plans depending on the situation, and maintained contact with all subordinate units. His troops felt the firm hand of their commander and acted with the confidence of people who knew they were led by a true military leader. The tank units of Generals Kravchenko and Selivanov were particularly successful. They penetrated deep into the enemy's defenses, threatening to encircle large German forces. The German command was forced to begin a general retreat, abandoning heavy weapons and equipment. By the end of September 1943, Malinovsky's troops had liberated the entire Donbass region. It was a major strategic victory. The Soviet Union regained a crucial industrial area, while the German army suffered heavy losses. Moreover, the success in the Donbass paved the way for further advances in Ukraine. But Malinovsky had no intention of stopping there. He understood that it was necessary to build on this success and not give the enemy a chance to regroup. Ahead lay new battles, new liberated cities, and new victories on the road to the complete defeat of Nazi Germany. For the successful conduct of the Donbass operation, Colonel General Malinovsky was awarded the Order of Kutuzov, First Class. It was a well-deserved award for his brilliant military artistry and ability to command large units in difficult conditions. The liberation of Donbass was only the first stage in a grand campaign to expel German troops from Ukrainian soil. In the fall of 1943, Malinovsky's troops faced a new task: crossing the Dnieper River and liberating the right bank of Ukraine. This river was the Germans' last hope for creating an impregnable defensive line in the east. The German command turned the Dnieper into a powerful defensive line, which they called the Eastern Wall in their propaganda. The right bank of the river was turned into a continuous fortress. Every settlement and every hill was adapted for defense. The Germans were confident that Soviet troops would not be able to cross this water barrier. But could any river stop a man who had already traveled from Stalingrad to Donbass? Malinovsky carefully prepared the operation to cross the Dnieper. He understood that success depended on surprise, decisive action, and the skillful coordination of all branches of the military. It was decided that the main strike would be delivered in the Zaporizhia area. Here, the Dnieper was relatively narrow, and capturing the crossing would allow the offensive to advance deep into right bank Ukraine. Malinovsky personally chose this direction after studying all the intelligence data. Preparations for the crossing were carried out in the strictest secrecy. the troops advanced to the river only at night, carefully camouflaging their positions. Crossing equipment was prepared in advance: pontoons, boats, and improvised materials. Each unit was given a clear task and knew its role in the overall plan of the operation. On September 26, 1943, the crossing of the Dnieper began. The first to cross were the assault groups, which were to capture bridgeheads on the right bank. They operated at night, using every shadow and every shelter to remain undetected by German intelligence. By morning, several Soviet units were already fighting on the right bank of the Dnieper. They held their ground under fierce enemy fire, repelled fierce counterattacks, and expanded the captured bridgeheads. Every meter of Ukrainian land came at a high price, but the Soviet soldiers knew that they were liberating their homeland. Malinovsky personally supervised the crossing of troops. He was at the command post near the river, from where he could see the entire panorama of the battle. The commander constantly adjusted his plans, transferring reserves to the most threatening areas. By the end of October, Malinovsky's troops had not only held their positions on the right bank of the Dnieper, but had also significantly expanded them. The German defenses were broken through on a wide front. Soviet tank units rushed into the breach, advancing deep into enemy territory. Events developed particularly successfully in the Dnipropetrovsk area. The city was liberated as a result of a swift strike by a tank corps, which bypassed the German positions from the flank. It was a classic encirclement operation, brilliantly executed by Malinovsky's troops. The crossing of the Dnieper became one of the greatest feats of the Red Army. This operation showed that no water barriers or fortifications could stop the Soviet troops when they were commanded by such leaders as Rodion Malinovsky. For the successful conduct of this operation, the commander was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. In the spring of 1944, Army General Rodion Malinovsky received a new assignment that radically changed the nature of his military activities. He was appointed commander of the Third Ukrainian Front, and his task was not simply to liberate Soviet territory, but to begin the liberation of Europe from Nazi occupation. The new front operated on the southern wing of the Soviet-German front. Here, the Germans had created a powerful defensive group, which included not only German troops, but also the armies of their allies, Romanians, Hungarians, and Bulgarians. Would the Soviet commander be able to defeat this multinational coalition and open the way to the heart of Europe? Malinovsky understood that the upcoming operations would be radically different from anything he had done before. Now, it was not only a matter of military tasks, but also of complex political issues. In liberating European countries, Soviet troops had to take into account national characteristics, traditions, and aspirations for independence. The first major task of the new front was to prepare for the Crimean operation. The peninsula had been under German occupation for 2 years. The 17th German Army, commanded by General Ennecke, had turned Crimea into a powerful fortress that controlled the entire Black Sea region. Planning the Crimean operation required Malinovsky to stretch all his abilities as a strategist to the limit. The peninsula was connected to the mainland only by the narrow Perekop Isthmus, which the Germans had turned into an impregnable fortress. The alternative was a landing across the Sivash, a shallow bay that was considered impassable. Malinovsky chose an unexpected solution: to launch the main attack across the Sivash, which the Germans considered impassable. This rotten bay was indeed a serious obstacle, shallow, swampy, with a boggy bottom. But Soviet intelligence determined that in some places it could be crossed on foot. On April 8, 1944, the Crimean offensive began. While artillery fire thundered at Perekop, distracting the enemy's attention, the main forces of the front secretly approached Sivash. At night, knee-deep in icy water, Soviet soldiers began the crossing. The Germans were stunned by the suddenness of the attack. They did not expect the Soviet troops to be able to overcome this water obstacle. By morning, Entire divisions were already fighting on the southern shore of Sivash. The German defense of Crimea was broken in the most unexpected place. "The impossible has become possible," one of the German officers wrote in his diary. But he did not yet know that this was only the beginning of a series of impossible operations by Malinovsky. The Soviet troops rapidly built on their success. Tank units, having crossed the Sivash, rushed deep into the peninsula. The liberation of Crimea proceeded at a rapid pace. The cities of Jankoy, Simferopol, Feodosia, and Kerch were liberated from German occupation one after another. The 17th German Army, unable to organize a systematic retreat, rolled back to Sevastopol. The storming of Sevastopol became a separate heroic page in the Crimean operation. The hero city, which had been defended by Soviet troops for 247 days at the beginning of the war, was now to be liberated. The Germans had turned it into a powerful fortress, using the same fortifications that had once protected Soviet soldiers. Malinovsky personally supervised the preparations for the assault. He studied every hill, every pillbox, and planned the coordination of the infantry, artillery, and aviation. The commander understood the symbolic significance of the liberation of Sevastopol. It was not just a military operation, but the restoration of historical justice. On May 9, 1944, Sevastopol was liberated. This was a symbolic gift for the anniversary of the victory over fascism. The Crimean operation ended with the complete defeat of German troops on the peninsula. The 17th Army practically ceased to exist. For his brilliant conduct of the Crimean operation, Malinovsky was awarded the Order of Victory, the highest military award of the USSR. But most importantly, he proved that he was capable of conducting the most complex operations with minimal losses and maximum results. Now the roads of Europe lay open before him, and Romania was the first on the way. In the summer of 1944, Marshal Malinovsky was faced with a task that would determine his place in history as the liberator of Europe. He was to lead the Iasi-Kishinev offensive, one of the most brilliant offensive operations of the Great Patriotic War. It was here, in the Moldavian steppes, that the Malinovsky School of Military Art would finally take shape. The situation in Moldova was extremely difficult. The German Army Group South Ukraine, commanded by Field Marshal Schörner, included 18 German divisions and 24 Romanian divisions. The enemy had created a powerful echeloned defense, relying on the Dniester and Prut rivers. Malinovsky understood that such a grouping could not be defeated with a simple frontal attack. A brilliant plan was needed that would exploit the enemy's weaknesses and make the most effective use of the available forces. Would the son of a railway worker from Odessa be able to outmaneuver the renowned German strategists? The plan of operation developed by Malinovsky's staff was truly daring. It involved two powerful strikes, from the north and south, to encircle the entire German-Romanian force in the area of Chisinau and Iași. It was a classic encirclement operation, but on a scale unprecedented in military history. Preparations for the operation were carried out with exceptional care. Malinovsky personally supervised every detail. Troops were secretly concentrated. Ammunition and fuel were stockpiled, and the enemy's defense system was studied. Particular attention was paid to cooperation with Romanian units, which by this time were ready to side with the anti-Hitler coalition. On August 20, 1944, the Iași-Kishinev offensive began. Powerful artillery fire rained down on German positions across the entire front. But the main strikes were delivered in two directions, north and south of the enemy's main group. The element of surprise was complete. The German command expected a frontal attack and did not anticipate the possibility of a double envelopment. Soviet tank units broke through the enemy's defenses and rushed toward each other, seeking to close the encirclement. On the second day of the operation, it became clear that Malinovsky's plan was working flawlessly. The northern and southern strike groups advanced according to schedule. while German reserves rushed about, trying to close the gaps in their defenses. "This is not an offensive, it's a symphony," one of the military correspondents remarked admiringly. On August 24th, the encirclement was completed in the Liovo area. 22 enemy divisions, more than 200,000 soldiers and officers, were trapped in the cauldron. It was the largest group surrounded by Soviet troops since the beginning of the war. It took only a few days to eliminate the encircled group. German and Romanian troops, deprived of supplies and command, surrendered en masse. On August 29th, the last pockets of resistance were suppressed. In 6 days, the entire enemy army group was defeated in the Iasi-Kishinev operation. It was a triumph for Soviet military art and for Marshal Malinovsky personally. The road to Romania was open. The defeat of the German-Romanian group in Moldova opened the way for Malinovsky's troops to Romania, the first European country to be liberated from the fascist yoke. It was a historic event. For the first time, the Red Army crossed the borders of the Soviet Union not as an invader, but as the liberator of the oppressed peoples of Europe. Entering Romania required Malinovsky to solve not only military, but also complex political tasks. Romania was an ally of Germany, but the Romanian people never supported the war against the USSR. Marshal Antonescu's regime was held together only by German bayonets. How should Soviet troops behave in a country that was formally an enemy, but was in fact waiting to be liberated? Malinovsky issued a special order to the frontline troops on how to behave on Romanian territory. This document became a model of humane treatment of the population of liberated countries. The commander categorically prohibited any requisitions, looting, or insults to the national dignity of the Romanian people. The Soviet offensive in Romania developed rapidly. Romanian units defected en masse to the Red Army or simply scattered. German troops, left without the support of their allies, were unable to withstand the onslaught of the Soviet armies. The road to Bucharest was practically open. On August 23, 1944, an anti-fascist coup took place in Romania. King Michael arrested dictator Antonescu and announced the country's withdrawal from the war on the side of Germany. The new government appealed to the Allies for peace. This event radically changed the situation in the Balkans. Romania not only withdrew from the war, but also declared war on Germany. Its army, which had been fighting against Soviet troops just yesterday, was now ready to fight against its former allies. History had seen many examples of allies changing sides, but such a rapid turn of events astonished even experienced diplomats. Malinovsky treated these changes with his usual caution. He understood that political declarations were one thing, but real actions were quite another. Soviet troops continued their offensive without slowing down, but the commander gave instructions to treat Romanian units as potential allies. On August 31, 1944, the advanced units of the 3rd Ukrainian Front entered Bucharest. The Romanian capital was liberated with virtually no fighting. The population welcomed the Soviet soldiers as liberators, giving them flowers and offering them food and drink. It was a triumphant moment in Marshal Malinovsky's military career. He became the first Soviet commander whose troops liberated a European capital. The son of an Odessa railway worker entered Bucharest as a liberating commander. Could he have dreamed of such a fate in his distant youth? The liberation of Romania was of enormous strategic importance. Germany lost an important ally and source of oil. The Balkans were on the verge of complete liberation from the fascist troops. The road to Hungary and further, to the heart of Europe, was open. Malinovsky understood that the liberation of Romania was only the first step on the road to complete victory over fascism. Ahead lay new battles, new countries and new cities awaiting liberation, and he was ready to lead his troops further, to the final victory over evil. The liberation of Romania opened the way for Marshal Malinovsky to Hungary, a country that would become the arena for one of the fiercest battles of the final period of the war. The Hungarian campaign would require the Soviet commander to exert all his abilities to the maximum, and would be a severe test for his troops. Hungary remained a loyal ally of Nazi Germany. Despite military setbacks, Admiral Horthy's regime continued to support Hitler. Hungarian troops fought against the Red Army with fanatical tenacity. Why did this beautiful country on the Danube cling so tightly to its alliance with the fascists? The German command understood perfectly well the strategic importance of Hungary. The loss of this country would mean the final collapse of the German defense in the Balkans, and would open a direct path for the Allies to the borders of the Reich itself. Therefore, the Germans concentrated large forces in Hungary, under the command of experienced generals. In September 1944, Malinovsky's troops crossed the Romanian-Hungarian border and entered Hungarian territory. It immediately became clear that completely different battles awaited them here. While in Romania, the enemy often retreated without serious resistance, the Hungarians and Germans fought for every village. The offensive progressed slowly. The enemy skillfully used the features of the terrain: hills, forests, and numerous rivers. Every hill became a fortress, every settlement a center of resistance. Malinovsky realized that the Hungarian campaign would be long and bloody. Particularly fierce fighting broke out for the city of Debrecen, a major industrial center in eastern Hungary. The German command concentrated significant forces here, including SS tank divisions. The battle for Debrecen lasted several weeks and became one of the bloodiest battles of the Hungarian campaign. Malinovsky personally commanded the operation to capture Debrecen. He employed a tactic that would later become classic: a combination of frontal attacks with deep flanking maneuvers. While the main forces pinned down the enemy from the front, tank corps bypassed the city and emerged behind it. This is not just a military operation. It is a chess game between grandmasters. One of the participants in the battle later wrote, "Indeed, the battles for Debrecen demonstrated the highest level of skill on the part of both the Soviet and German command." On October 20th, 1944, Debrecen was liberated. It was an important victory, but the road to Budapest was still long. The Germans were retreating, but each step backward cost the Soviet troops heavy losses. In November 1944, an event occurred that could have radically changed the course of the Hungarian campaign. Admiral Horthy attempted to withdraw Hungary from the war and conclude a separate peace with the Allies. But the Germans were prepared for such a turn of events. Hitler ordered Horthy to be captured, and a puppet government of Nihilists, led by Selassie, to be brought to power in Hungary. This government announced that it would continue the war until victory. The Hungarian people were doomed to months of bloody battles because of the ambitions of their rulers. Now, Malinovsky faced a task that was not only military but also political in nature: to liberate the Hungarian people from the power of the Nazi puppets and their German patrons. Ahead lay Budapest, the pearl of the Danube, which would become the arena for one of the most brutal urban battles of the war. Budapest, the pearl of the Danube, the city of kings and poets, became the scene of one of the most brutal battles of World War II in December 1944. Marshal Malinovsky faced a task that would require his utmost skill as a commander and tremendous courage: the assault on the largest city in Central Europe. The German command had turned the Hungarian capital into an impregnable fortress. Every neighborhood was adapted for defense. Every building turned into a firing point. There were about 100,000 soldiers and officers in the city: Germans, Hungarians, and representatives of other countries allied with Germany. How could such a stronghold be stormed without turning the beautiful city into ruins? The plan of operation to capture Budapest, developed by Malinovsky's headquarters, was innovative. Instead of a frontal assault, it was proposed to surround the city and force the garrison to surrender. This would preserve historical monuments and minimize casualties among the civilian population. On December 26, 1944, the encirclement around Budapest was complete. Not only the military, but also hundreds of thousands of civilians found themselves trapped in the cauldron. Malinovsky understood that he was responsible not only for the outcome of the military operation, but also for the fate of innocent people. The Soviet command offered the German garrison to surrender. Parliamentarians under a white flag headed for the German positions with an offer to surrender. Would common sense prevail over fanaticism, and would a bloody assault be avoided? But hopes for a peaceful solution were not fulfilled. The German command rejected the offer of surrender. Moreover, fire was opened on the Soviet parliamentarians, a gross violation of the laws of war. It became clear that an assault was inevitable. The assault on Budapest began in January 1945. These were special battles, not the field battles that Soviet troops were accustomed to, but fierce urban combat for every house, every stairwell. The enemy used all the advantages of the defending side. Malinovsky personally commanded the operation. His command post was located in the suburbs of Budapest, from where he could control the actions of all units. The Marshal constantly adjusted plans, transferred reserves, and coordinated the actions of various branches of the military. Particularly fierce battles took place for Buda, the western, hilly part of the city. Here, on the high banks of the Danube, were located government buildings, the royal palace, and ancient fortresses. The Germans turned every building into a firing point. The eastern part of the city, Pest, was liberated relatively quickly. But Buda held out with desperate tenacity. The fighting took place in basements and attics, in sewer tunnels, and on rooftops. "Every stone of this city is soaked with blood," wrote one of the participants in the assault in his diary. By the end of January 1945, the resistance of the German garrison had been broken. The last defenders barricaded themselves in the royal castle on Buda Hill. On February 13th, this last stronghold fell. Budapest was completely liberated. The victory in Budapest was one of Marshal Malinovsky's greatest triumphs. He managed to capture a powerful fortress while preserving the city's main historical monuments. The liberation of the Hungarian capital opened the final act of the war in Europe. The road to Vienna was clear. After the capture of Budapest, Marshal Malinovsky had a clear path to the final goal of his liberation campaign: Vienna, the capital of Austria. This ancient capital of the Habsburgs was the last major city to be liberated from the fascist yoke by the troops of the Third Ukrainian Front. The Austrian operation differed from all of Malinovsky's previous campaigns. Austria was not an ally of Germany of its own free will. It had been annexed by the Nazis in 1938. The majority of the Austrian people did not support Hitler's regime and were waiting for liberation. How should Soviet troops act in a country that was a victim, not an accomplice, of aggression? Preparations for the Vienna operation began in February 1945, immediately after the end of the fighting in Budapest. Malinovsky understood that the Germans would defend the approaches to the Austrian capital with particular ferocity. Vienna was not just a large city, but a symbol of German domination in Central Europe. The German command had indeed created a powerful defense system on the approaches to Vienna. All natural barriers, rivers, mountains, forests, were used. Every settlement was turned into a fortress. In Vienna itself, there was a large garrison under the command of experienced generals. On March 16, 1945, the Vienna offensive began. Unlike previous campaigns, Malinovsky decided to act swiftly, not giving the enemy time to organize an orderly defense. Time was working against the Nazis. Every day of delay brought them closer to their final defeat. The offensive developed successfully. Soviet troops broke through German defenses in several areas and rushed towards the Austrian capital. Tank units acted in the vanguard, capturing bridges and crossings, preventing the enemy from blowing them up. General Zhdanov's 4th Guards Tank Corps distinguished itself in these battles. The tankers made a swift raid across Austrian territory, bypassing the main centers of German resistance. In a few days, they covered more than 100 kilometers and reached the outskirts of Vienna. But the main difficulty lay ahead. It was necessary to storm Vienna itself, a city with centuries of history, full of priceless monuments of architecture and art. Malinovsky understood that he was responsible to all of humanity for the preservation of these treasures. The plan for the assault on Vienna was developed with the need to preserve historical monuments in mind. The artillery received strict instructions not to fire on the historic city center. Tanks were prohibited from using heavy shells when firing at buildings. "We came here not to destroy, but to liberate," Malinovsky said at a meeting of commanders on the eve of the assault. These words became the motto of the entire operation. Soviet soldiers and officers were well aware of the historical significance of the moment. The assault on Vienna began on the morning of April 6, 1945. Soviet troops advanced from several directions, seeking to disperse enemy forces. The main attack came from the east, from the Hungarian border. German resistance was fierce but short-lived. The Vienna garrison, weakened by previous battles and demoralized by the inevitability of defeat, was unable to organize a stubborn defense. On April 13th, the Austrian capital was completely liberated. The liberation of Vienna was the final chord in Marshal Malinovsky's military career. From Stalingrad to Vienna, what a journey this amazing man had made. The son of a railway worker from Odessa became the liberator of Europe. On April 13, 1945, when the last German soldier left the center of Vienna, Marshal Rodion Malinovsky's amazing journey from a simple working-class boy to the liberator of Europe came to an end. During 4 years of war, he rose from corps commander to front commander, from defending his native land to storming enemy capitals. After the end of the war in Europe, Malinovsky faced new challenges. The Soviet government transferred his troops to the Far East, where they were to complete the defeat of Nazi Germany's last ally, militaristic Japan. Was this man destined to participate in all the decisive battles of World War II? The Far Eastern Campaign of August 1945 became Malinovsky's last military triumph. His troops swiftly defeated the Japanese Kwantung Army in Manchuria and liberated South Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. World War II ended with a complete victory for the anti-Hitler coalition. After the war, Marshal Malinovsky continued to serve in the armed forces of the USSR. He commanded military districts and held high positions in the Ministry of Defense. In 1957, he was appointed Minister of Defense of the USSR, the highest position a military officer could attain in peacetime. As Minister of Defense, Malinovsky was involved in rearming the army, introducing new types of weapons, and training personnel. He was one of the creators of the Soviet nuclear missile forces, understanding that future wars would be fought using methods completely different from those in which he had participated. But how can we assess the main achievement of this man's life? The liberation of the peoples of Europe from the fascist yoke. Malinovsky commanded the troops that liberated Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Hungary, and Austria. Millions of people owe him their freedom and their lives. It is particularly important to note the humane nature of Malinovsky's military operations. He always sought to minimize casualties among the civilian population and to preserve historical monuments and cultural treasures. In the liberated cities, his troops behaved as defenders, not conquerors. Malinovsky's military art was distinguished by its innovation and effectiveness. He was one of the creators of the theory of deep operations and a master of encirclement and flanking maneuvers. His operations are studied in military academies around the world as examples of the art of command. Rodion Yakovlevich Malinovsky died on March 23, 1967, in Moscow. He was buried on Red Square near the Kremlin Wall, the highest honor bestowed upon heroes of the fatherland. Thus ended the earthly journey of a man who inscribed his name in gold letters in the history of the liberation of Europe. The memory of Marshal Malinovsky lives on not only in history textbooks and on memorial plaques. The main monument to him is a free Europe, which he helped liberate from the fascist yoke. Millions of people in Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Hungary, and Austria remember him as a liberator. From the son of a railway worker to Marshal of the Soviet Union, from defender of Stalingrad to liberator of Vienna, Such was the fate of Rodion Malinovsky. His life proved that in a just war, an ordinary person can rise to heights unattainable by professional military personnel. The main thing is to believe in the righteousness of your cause and serve the people. Malinovsky's legacy is not only military victories, but also the principles of humane warfare, respect for other peoples, and the pursuit of peace. In our time, when the world is once again shaken by military conflicts, his example is particularly relevant. A true commander fights not for glory, but for peace.